Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us, by Robert D. Hare, Ph.D. Introduction. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. They're charming, witty, maybe even seem a little too perfect. They look you right in the eye, make you feel seen, understood. They tell fascinating stories, paint grand pictures of the future. You feel a connection, an instant rapport. It feels good, right? Like you've met someone special. But what if, beneath that polished surface, there was nothing? No real warmth, no empathy, no conscience. What if that charm was just a tool, like a key used to unlock your trust, your resources, maybe even your heart, only to take what they want and move on, leaving confusion and wreckage behind? It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? A chilling thought. Yet, the reality is that such individuals walk among us. We call them psychopaths, and understanding them isn't just an academic exercise, it's a crucial part of navigating the complex world we live in. Today, we're diving deep into a truly landmark book, Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us, written by Dr. Robert D. Hare. This isn't just a book on psychopathy. For decades, it has been the book, the essential guide written by the very researcher who developed the modern scientific tool used globally to assess this condition. It's sold countless copies, been translated into numerous languages, and fundamentally shaped how professionals in psychology, criminology, and law enforcement understand this disturbing personality disorder. Dr. Hare spent a quarter-century immersed in this world, not just observing from afar, but engaging directly, trying to unravel the mystery of individuals who operate without the internal compass most of us rely on. He saw the confusion not just among the public, but even among professionals who encountered these individuals daily. He realized that the inability to recognize psychopathy had dire consequences for society and devastating impacts on personal lives. So, why should you, a bright young person figuring out the world, care about such a dark topic? Because understanding the extremes of human behavior helps us better understand the range of human behavior. It sharpens our perception, helps us recognize manipulation, and ultimately, empowers us to protect ourselves, physically, emotionally, and financially. In the next half hour or so, I promise to guide you through Dr. Hare's fascinating, and sometimes unsettling, insights. We'll explore who these individuals are, what makes them tick, or rather, what doesn't, and why they can be so dangerously captivating. By the end, you'll have a much clearer picture of this complex disorder, and perhaps, you'll look at the world, and the people in it, with slightly wiser eyes. Let's begin this journey together. Book Summary. Dr. Hare begins his exploration not with dry definitions, but with experiences. He shares a story from his early career, fresh out of graduate school in the 1960s, when he took a job as the sole psychologist at a maximum security prison. He was young, inexperienced, thrown into a world utterly alien to him. On his very first day, an inmate arrived at his office. Let's call him Ray. Ray was tall, buzzing with energy, and possessed an unnervingly intense, direct eye contact that made the young psychologist feel as if he'd never truly looked anyone in the eye before. Without preamble, Ray launched in, "Hey, Doc, I've got a problem. I need your help." Eager to start his therapeutic work, the psychologist invited him to share. What happened next wasn't a confession of inner turmoil. Ray pulled out a knife, waved it casually in front of the psychologist's nose, maintaining that intense gaze and an unnerving smile. The psychologist froze, his hand hovering near the emergency button, acutely aware that Ray saw it too. But something, maybe sensing a test, maybe realizing help wouldn't arrive in time anyway, stopped him. Ray then explained the knife wasn't for the psychologist, but for another inmate bothering his protégé. Ray wasn't seeking counseling. He was sizing up the new psychologist, testing his boundaries. Would he report the weapon, following prison rules? Or would he keep quiet to build rapport? The young Dr. Hare chose silence. And just like that, Ray had him pegged? A soft touch, someone who could be manipulated. For the next 8 months, Ray made his life miserable with constant demands and schemes. He conned the psychologist into supporting a transfer to the kitchen, supposedly to pursue a passion for cooking. The real reason? Access to ingredients for making prison alcohol. An exploding still under the warden's table later revealed Ray's true passion. Undeterred, Ray soon charmed his way into the auto shop. Ray possessed an incredible ability to talk, lie, and manipulate with a smoothness that could disarm even seasoned prison staff. He'd spin tales of reform, of newfound passions, contradicting his long criminal record without a flicker of shame. When caught in a lie, confronted with evidence from his own file, he'd simply shift gears, change the subject, utterly unfazed. Before leaving the prison, the psychologist nearly fell for Ray's plea to get him a job with his father, only to be saved by the mocking laughter of experienced guards who knew Ray's game all too well. The final twist came when the psychologist had his old car repaired in the prison auto shop where Ray worked. On the long drive to his new university post, the car mysteriously developed problems: ball bearings in the carburetor, a tampered radiator hose, and most chillingly, a slowly leaking brake line that failed completely on a long downhill stretch. Coincidence? Dr. Hare doubted it. Years later, while registering students at the university, Dr. Hare heard a familiar voice boasting to another professor, "Yeah, I worked as Dr. Hare's assistant at the penitentiary. Did all his paperwork. We worked great together." It was Ray, trying to con his way into university with fraudulent transcripts. Confronted, Ray didn't miss a beat, just a breezy "Hey, Doc, how's it going?" before seamlessly continuing his fabricated story. This encounter, this baffling ability of Ray to override reality without compunction, sparked the question that would drive Dr. Hare's life work: what psychological makeup allows someone to operate this way? Ray's story, though laced with a certain dark humor in retrospect, is just one window into the world Dr. Hare meticulously maps out in Without Conscience. These individuals, the psychopaths, are not the raving psychos of cheap horror films. They are often outwardly normal, even exceptionally charming. As one writer, William March, put it, these monsters of real life usually looked and behaved in a more normal manner than their actually normal brothers and sisters. They presented a more convincing picture of virtue than virtue presented of itself. Dr. Hare defines psychopathy as a personality disorder characterized by a specific cluster of behaviors and inferred personality traits. Think of it as a syndrome, a collection of symptoms that hang together. He stresses that diagnosing someone is a serious matter, requiring extensive evidence. And importantly, not everyone described in the book, especially those from media reports, is definitively a psychopath, but their actions illustrate key traits. So, what are these traits? Dr. Hare developed a tool, the Psychopathy Checklist, or PCLR, now used worldwide, to bring clarity and reliability to diagnosis. This tool identifies two main clusters of characteristics: emotional/interpersonal traits and social deviance or lifestyle traits. You need both clusters to be present for a diagnosis. Let's explore the emotional and interpersonal side first. One of the most striking features is being glib and superficial. Psychopaths can be incredibly witty, articulate, and entertaining conversationalists. They spin convincing, often self-aggrandizing stories. Think of the charming con artist who talks his way into loans, jobs, or relationships. They often present themselves extremely well, seeming likable and engaging. However, astute observers might sense something off, a slickness, an insincerity, as if they are actors reading lines. They might pepper their speech with jargon from fields like psychology or law, trying to appear knowledgeable, but lacking real depth. A telling sign is their utter lack of concern when caught in these exaggerations or lies. Remember Ray boasting about being Dr. Hare's assistant? Unfazed, even when confronted. Truman Capote, in his book In Cold Blood, described Dick Hickok's effortless ability to con a store clerk into giving him cash back on a bad check, simply through sheer, breezy confidence. It's a performance, often a very convincing one. Jeffrey MacDonald, the physician convicted of killing his family, could describe the horrific events in a detached, glib manner that stunned observers. This superficial charm is coupled with an egocentric and grandiose sense of self. Psychopaths possess a deeply narcissistic view of their own worth and importance. They see themselves as the center of the universe, superior beings justified in living by their own rules. "I follow my own laws," one told Dr. Hare. They often come across as arrogant, opinionated, cocky, loving power and control. They rarely feel embarrassed by their problems, legal, financial, or personal, seeing them merely as temporary setbacks caused by bad luck or others' incompetence. They might boast of grand plans, becoming a tycoon, a lawyer for the poor, with little understanding of how to achieve them. One inmate, Jack, who scored maximally on the checklist, bounced from petty theft to burglary to armed robbery, viewing his victims with contempt. "They always get back more than they lost in insurance anyway." Despite being overweight and out of shape after years in prison, he confidently planned to become a professional swimmer upon release. This grandiosity isn't just talk. Given the right victims and circumstances, it can lead to spectacular, albeit destructive, success, like the entrepreneur who thinks big with other people's money. Perhaps the most defining emotional trait is a profound lack of remorse or guilt. Psychopaths show a stunning lack of concern for the devastation they cause. They often state quite calmly that they feel no guilt, aren't sorry, and see no reason why they should be. One inmate, asked about stabbing a robbery victim, retorted, "Get real. He spends a few months in a hospital and I rot here. I gave him a break." Ted Bundy dismissed guilt as merely an unhealthy social control mechanism. Even when they verbalize remorse, it often rings hollow, contradicted by their words or actions. Prison inmates quickly learn that saying "I'm sorry" might help at parole hearings, but probing reveals no genuine feeling behind the words. Some even rationalize their actions by blaming the victim or minimizing the harm. Jack Abbott, the writer championed by Norman Mailer who later killed a waiter, claimed the stabbing was an accident and denied feeling remorse, stating the victim had no future anyway. This lack of guilt is tied to a remarkable ability to rationalize their behavior and shrug off personal responsibility. They readily use excuses like memory loss, amnesia, multiple personality, or temporary insanity. John Wayne Gacy, who murdered 33 young men, portrayed himself as the 34th victim, cheated out of his childhood. Closely linked to the lack of guilt is a profound lack of empathy. Psychopaths seem unable to truly understand or share the feelings of others, except on a purely intellectual level. Other people's feelings simply don't concern them. They view people as objects to be used for their own gratification, often targeting the weak and vulnerable. One rapist struggled to understand his victim's fear, saying, "I've been scared myself, and it wasn't unpleasant." This lack of empathy isn't selective, it extends to family members as well as strangers. Family ties, if maintained, are often possessive, viewing spouses or children like property. This profound inability to appreciate others' feelings allows for behavior that seems horrific and baffling to normal people. From callous emotional abuse and parasitic exploitation to, in extreme cases, torture and murder performed with the same concern one might feel carving a turkey. Naturally flowing from these traits is a tendency to be deceitful and manipulative. Lying comes as easily as breathing to psychopaths. They are unfazed by the prospect of being caught. If challenged, they simply change their story or twist the facts to fit the lie, often leaving the listener utterly confused. Much of their lying seems motivated by nothing more than the sheer delight of duping someone. They seem proud of their ability to lie. Yanine Jones, the nurse convicted of murdering infants, skillfully manipulated reality, contradicting facts and even her own previous statements, convinced her "mouth's going to get me out of it." Sometimes the lies are so blatant and nonchalant, it makes you question the speaker's sanity. One inmate, nicknamed Motormouth, could spin a dizzying, entirely fabricated life story. Pilot at 15, lived on 4 continents, deep-sea diver, so convincingly that even experienced interviewers were initially impressed. Given this ease with deception, it's no surprise they excel at cheating, fraud, cons, and manipulation, feeling no compunction about exploiting others' weaknesses. Ted Bundy notoriously used fake injuries, a leg cast, an arm sling, to lure sympathetic young women into helping him, playing on their compassion to lead them to their deaths. That covers the core emotional and interpersonal features. Now let's turn to the second cluster, the social deviance or lifestyle traits. Psychopaths tend to be highly impulsive. They act on the spur of the moment, giving little thought to consequences. "I did it because I felt like it," is a common explanation. Their actions are often driven by the desire for immediate satisfaction or relief, much like an infant demanding satiation. Unlike most people, who learn to delay gratification, psychopaths seem never to master this. They ignore others' needs in pursuit of their own immediate wants. This leads to a chaotic lifestyle. Quitting jobs, breaking off relationships, changing plans, hurting people on a whim. One subject robbed a gas station, injuring the attendant, simply because he didn't want to walk 6 blocks back home to get his wallet for beer money. They live day to day, with little serious thought for the future. Coupled with impulsivity are poor behavior controls. They are highly reactive to perceived insults or frustrations. While most of us can inhibit aggressive responses, psychopaths have weak controls. The slightest provocation can trigger sudden violence, threats, or verbal abuse. They take offense easily over trivial matters. An inmate might beat another senseless for an accidental bump in line, then step back into place as if nothing happened. Importantly, these outbursts, though extreme, are often short-lived and seem cold, lacking the intense emotional arousal most people feel when losing their temper. They seem to know exactly what they're doing, using aggression instrumentally. "I decide how much I want to hurt the guy," one explained. Despite causing serious harm, they rarely acknowledge having a temper problem, viewing their aggression as a natural response to provocation. Psychopaths have a persistent need for excitement. They crave living in the fast lane, on the edge, often involving rule-breaking. They are easily bored and cannot tolerate routine or monotony. Many use drugs, move frequently, or change jobs constantly in search of a new thrill. Doing crime itself can be the source of excitement. One woman found walking through airports with drugs the most exciting thing. Another enjoyed the adrenaline rush of being an enforcer, even provoking bar fights for stimulation. This need for thrills makes them ill-suited for jobs requiring patience, meticulousness, or reliability, like bomb disposal experts who referred to psychopaths as unreliable cowboys, spies, or even organized crime figures, where their impulsivity makes them dangerous loose cannons. Unsurprisingly, psychopaths demonstrate a marked lack of responsibility. Obligations and commitments mean nothing. Promises are easily made and just as easily broken. Their lives are often littered with failed financial obligations, defaulted loans, and ignored child support payments. This unreliability permeates every area: erratic job performance, misuse of resources, violating policies. They don't honor commitments to people, organizations, or principles. Diane Downs frequently left her young children alone or neglected their basic needs, professing love while showing callous indifference. This indifference to children's welfare is common. Children are often seen as inconveniences. They readily exploit family and friends, inducing parents to post bail money they have no intention of honoring, leaving loved ones to face the consequences. They show little concern for the risks their actions pose to others, like the man with dozens of dangerous driving convictions who intended to keep driving because it takes two to have an accident, or HIV-positive individuals who continue unprotected sex. Even when under the direct supervision of the justice system on probation or parole, they ignore conditions imposed by the courts. Most psychopaths exhibit early behavior problems. Serious issues often surface long before adolescence: persistent lying, cheating, theft, fire setting, truancy, substance abuse, vandalism, violence, bullying, running away, and precocious sexuality. While many kids exhibit some of these behaviors, the psychopath's history is typically far more extensive and severe, even compared to siblings raised in the same environment. Cruelty to animals is a particularly ominous sign. Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood included impaling a dog's head on a stick and staking cats to trees. Adult psychopaths often recount such incidents matter-of-factly, even with amusement. One chuckled about shooting a dog with a pellet gun. Another described batting cats around a pole with a tennis racket. Cruelty often extends to other children, fueled by the same lack of empathy. While not all adult psychopaths showed extreme cruelty, virtually all had a youth marked by a wide range of trouble. These early problems typically blossom into adult antisocial behavior. Psychopaths view society's rules as inconvenient impediments. The impulsive, deceitful, unempathetic child becomes much the same as an adult, demonstrating a remarkable lifelong continuity of self-serving, antisocial conduct. Much of this behavior leads to criminal convictions. Even within prisons, psychopaths stand out for the frequency and variety of their offenses. They tend to be criminally versatile, trying their hand at everything rather than specializing. However, not all psychopaths end up in jail. Many operate on the shady side of the law: phony stock promotions, questionable business practices, spouse or child abuse. Others engage in behavior that, while not illegal, is unethical, immoral, or harmful: philandering, neglecting family, misusing company funds. It's crucial to remember that possessing some of these traits doesn't make someone a psychopath. Many people might be impulsive, or irresponsible, or lack empathy in certain situations. Psychopathy is the syndrome, the clustering of most of these traits, both the emotional/interpersonal ones and the lifestyle/antisocial ones. It's the combination that creates the distinct, destructive pattern Dr. Hare describes. Now, this raises a fundamental question. If psychopaths lack empathy, remorse, and the deep emotional connections that form the basis of conscience for most people, what exactly is guiding their behavior? Dr. Hare argues that the missing piece is internal controls. Most of us learn, through socialization, to internalize society's rules. This process helps form our conscience, that inner voice that makes us resist temptation and feel guilty when we transgress. This inner policeman regulates our behavior even when no external authority is watching. It's what allows society to function. For psychopaths, however, this process seems to fail. They might intellectually know the rules, but they lack the inner voice, the emotional weight that compels adherence. They feel little resistance to temptation and no guilt afterward. Without the shackles of a nagging conscience, they feel free to do whatever they think they can get away with to satisfy their needs. Why is their conscience so weak, if it exists at all? Dr. Hare suggests several possibilities based on research. First, they seem to have a diminished capacity to experience fear and anxiety, the very emotions that underpin conscience formation. For most people, punishment in childhood creates a link between forbidden acts and anxiety. The mere thought of the act can trigger anxiety, suppressing the behavior. In psychopaths, these links are weak. The threat of punishment doesn't deter them effectively. This helps explain why punishment often seems useless in changing their behavior. Second, their inner speech, the way they talk to themselves, appears to lack emotional punch. When a psychopath considers consequences, if I do this, X might happen, the thought doesn't carry the same emotional weight or deterrent force it would for others. Third, research on their language processing suggests that emotional words don't resonate with them the way they do for non-psychopaths. In experiments measuring brain responses and reaction times to words, psychopaths process words like death or rape more like neutral words such as table or chair. It's as if the emotional coloring, the deeper significance of the words, is missing for them. They know the dictionary definition, the words, but not the emotional music. This profound disconnect between language and emotion helps explain their ability to say "I love you" right after inflicting pain, or to describe horrific acts with chilling detachment. Their conscience, if it speaks at all, speaks in empty words. This doesn't mean psychopaths are automatons, blindly responding to impulses. They can follow rules, but they pick and choose based purely on self-interest and calculation of risk, unburdened by the anxieties, doubts, and concerns for others that guide most people's choices. This unique psychological makeup makes crime, for many psychopaths, a logical choice. While many factors lead people to crime, poverty, abuse, addiction, passion, psychopaths often commit crime simply because it pays, it's easy, or it's exciting. Their personality structure, devoid of internal controls and empathy, naturally aligns with taking advantage of opportunities, regardless of social rules. They show no loyalty to groups or codes beyond looking out for number one, which makes them useful informants but terrible partners in crime. Their heavy involvement in crime is disproportionate to their numbers. While making up maybe 1% of the general population, though estimates vary, they constitute around 15 to 25% of prison populations and are responsible for upwards of 50% of serious crime. Their violence is particularly noteworthy, often callous, instrumental, cold-blooded, used simply to get what they want, whether it's money, sex, or silencing an inconvenience. Unlike violence born of intense emotion, their aggression often lacks that emotional coloring. This makes them particularly dangerous repeat offenders. Studies consistently show that psychopaths recidivate, reoffend after release, at rates 2 to 3 times higher than other criminals, especially for violent offenses. This predictive power of the psychopathy diagnosis is crucial for the criminal justice system, particularly in decisions about parole and sentencing. A common question is whether psychopaths grow out of it. Research indicates that their overt criminal activity tends to peak in young adulthood and often decreases significantly around age 40. However, this burnout seems primarily related to the high-energy, impulsive crimes. The underlying personality traits, the egocentricity, callousness, manipulation, often remain. They may simply learn less overtly antisocial ways to satisfy their needs, becoming perhaps sub-criminal psychopaths rather than overt criminals. This brings us to the white-collar or sub-criminal psychopath. These are individuals who possess the core personality traits, but, perhaps due to intelligence, family background, or social skills, manage to operate within society, often achieving positions of power or status, without getting formally convicted of crimes. They might be the ruthless business executive, the unethical lawyer, the manipulative politician, the exploitative doctor or therapist. Their behavior technically might not be illegal, but it hovers on the shady side, violating ethical standards and leaving a trail of used-up people, broken careers, and emotional devastation. John Grambling Jr., the man who defrauded banks of millions using charm and forged documents, exemplifies this type. His prosecutor noted, "Though his tools are genteel, his instincts are as savage as the street brute." These individuals exploit the trust inherent in social and professional roles, finding rich feeding grounds in areas like finance, politics, and even helping professions where vulnerability is high. Their success often relies on maintaining a convincing facade of normalcy, manipulating those above them while potentially abusing those below. So, if psychopathy often starts early, involves a fundamental lack of conscience, and is linked to high rates of crime and harm, the crucial question becomes, can anything be done? Dr. Hare addresses this with sobering realism. Historically, traditional forms of psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, group therapy, client-centered therapy, have proven largely ineffective. Biological therapies like drugs or psychosurgery haven't fared much better. Why is treatment so difficult? Several reasons stand out. First, the basic premise of most therapy is that the patient wants help for personal distress. Psychopaths typically don't feel distressed. They see nothing wrong with themselves and have no desire to change. They view therapy as a joke, therapists as objects to be manipulated. Second, their personality structure is extremely resistant to change. Third, they often enter treatment only under duress court order, parole condition. Fourth, they lack the capacity for the emotional introspection and genuine interpersonal connection required for most therapies. Worse still, some treatment programs might actually make psychopaths more dangerous. Group therapy settings, particularly those focused on empathy or understanding motivations, can inadvertently provide psychopaths with new insights into human vulnerability and better techniques for manipulation. They learn the jargon, the excuses "I was abused as a child," using therapy as a finishing school for antisocial skills. Studies of intensive therapeutic community programs found that psychopaths who participated were actually more likely to reoffend violently after release than untreated psychopaths. This bleak picture applies mainly to adults. What about early intervention? While difficult, this holds slightly more promise. Programs focusing on changing specific behaviors like aggression and teaching prosocial strategies for need satisfaction, especially if implemented very early and involving tight structure and supervision, might have some effect. However, even successful behavioral changes may not touch the core emotional deficits. Dr. Hare doesn't advocate giving up entirely. He notes that much of the past research on treatment was methodologically flawed, often lacking clear diagnostic criteria or control groups. Few programs have been designed specifically for psychopaths, acknowledging their unique mindset. He outlines principles for a potentially more effective program, focusing less on developing empathy likely impossible and more on convincing psychopaths, through rigorous structure and consequences, that prosocial behavior is in their own long-term self-interest. Such programs would require immense resources, tight control, and long-term supervision, with expectations for success remaining modest. This leaves us with a difficult reality, especially for those who encounter psychopaths in their personal lives. If fundamental change is unlikely, the focus must shift to self-protection and damage control. Dr. Hare offers crucial advice in what he calls a survival guide. First and foremost, know what you are dealing with. Understand the traits, the patterns, the potential for manipulation. Education is your first line of defense, though even experts can be fooled. Second, try not to be influenced by props. Be wary of overwhelming charm, intense eye contact, flashy appearances, or dramatic body language. These are often tools of distraction and manipulation. If you feel captivated or unnerved by someone's presentation, try closing your eyes and just listening critically to the content of what they're saying. Trust your gut feeling if someone's stare feels predatory or unsettling. Third, don't wear blinkers. Enter new relationships, especially those that seem too good to be true, with caution. Do some reasonable checking. Ask questions about their background, family, work. Vague, evasive, or inconsistent answers should raise red flags. Fourth, keep your guard up in high-risk situations. Places where people are lonely, seeking excitement, or away from their usual support systems like singles bars, resorts, foreign travel or hunting grounds for predators. Fifth, know yourself. Understand your own vulnerabilities. Are you a sucker for flattery? Lonely? Too trusting? Have a bit of larceny in your soul? Psychopaths excel at spotting and exploiting these weaknesses. Be extra critical of anyone who seems to cater perfectly to your deepest needs or insecurities. If you're already entangled, damage control is key. Obtain professional advice from clinicians experienced specifically with psychopathy. Be persistent, as many professionals may also be fooled by the psychopath's facade. Don't blame yourself. Their behavior is a reflection of their disorder, not your failing. Recognize who the real victim is. Don't waste sympathy on their self-pity. Realize you are not alone. Connect with others who may have been victimized by the same person. Be careful about power struggles. Psychopaths need to win and control, often resorting to intimidation or violence. Sometimes, understanding this allows strategic disengagement, but it's risky. Set firm ground rules and enforce them consistently, whether it's refusing financial bailouts or insisting on clear boundaries. Don't expect dramatic changes. Personality is deeply ingrained, and apparent improvements are often temporary or superficial. Ultimately, you may need to cut your losses to preserve your own emotional, financial, and physical well-being. This is incredibly difficult, especially for parents, but sometimes necessary for survival. Finally, use support groups. Connecting with others who understand can be invaluable. Dr. Hare concludes his sobering exploration with a call for more research. Despite decades of study, the fundamental mystery of psychopathy remains. Compared to other disorders, research funding and effort have been disproportionately small, given the immense social harm psychopaths cause. Understanding the roots, and developing effective early interventions, is crucial if we hope to mitigate the devastating impact of individuals living truly without conscience. Commentary. Reading without conscience is a powerful, and honestly, sometimes disturbing experience. Dr. Hare doesn't sensationalize, but the clinical reality he presents is stark. What stays with you long after you finish the book isn't just the profiles of criminals, but the chilling recognition that these traits, the charm, the manipulation, the utter lack of empathy, can exist behind perfectly normal, even successful, facades. Why does this matter so much, especially for someone young, just starting to build relationships and navigate the complexities of the adult world? Because awareness is protection. Understanding that not everyone operates with the same internal rules, that some individuals fundamentally lack the capacity for empathy and remorse, helps you become a more discerning judge of character. It helps you trust your intuition when something feels off, even if you can't immediately articulate why. The book powerfully illustrates how psychopaths exploit trust, kindness, and vulnerability. They are masters at identifying what people need: affection, validation, excitement, financial help, and mirroring it back to them, creating a powerful, often deceptive, bond. Learning to recognize these patterns, to look beyond the surface presentation, is an essential life skill. Dr. Hare's work also challenges some deeply held societal beliefs, particularly the idea that everyone is capable of change if given enough love or therapy. The hard truth about psychopathy, according to the research, is that the core personality structure is incredibly resistant to change. This doesn't mean we abandon compassion, but it does mean we need to be realistic, especially when our own safety or well-being is at stake. Pouring endless energy into trying to fix someone who fundamentally doesn't see a problem and lacks the capacity for genuine change can be utterly destructive. So, what can you take away from this, practically speaking? First, pay attention to patterns, not just apologies. Words are cheap for a psychopath. Look at consistent behavior over time. Do their actions match their words? Do they take responsibility, or constantly blame others and make excuses? Second, trust your gut feelings. If someone consistently makes you feel uneasy, confused, or intimidated, even if they are superficially charming, pay attention to that feeling. Don't dismiss your intuition just because someone presents well. Third, be wary of pity plays combined with charm. Psychopaths often use sob stories or feigned vulnerability to gain sympathy and lower your guard, only to exploit that trust later. True vulnerability is different from manipulative vulnerability. Finally, understand your own buttons. What do you crave most? Approval? Excitement? Security? Knowing your own needs and insecurities makes you less susceptible to those who would exploit them. Without conscience isn't about making you cynical or distrustful of everyone. It's about equipping you with knowledge. It's like learning about dangerous currents before swimming in the ocean. You still enjoy the water, but you're aware of the risks and know how to spot them. Understanding psychopathy helps you navigate the social world more safely and wisely, allowing you to build genuine connections based on mutual respect and empathy, while recognizing and protecting yourself from those who operate without them. That was our deep dive into the core ideas of Without Conscience by Dr. Robert D. Hare. We've explored the chilling characteristics, the underlying psychology, and the profound impact of individuals who navigate the world without the internal compass of conscience. We've touched upon the major insights today, but honestly, a summary like this is just scratching the surface. The true weight and nuance of Dr. Hare's work, the detailed case studies, the scientific grounding, that richness comes from engaging with the book directly. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's about gaining a perspective that can fundamentally sharpen your understanding of human nature and help you navigate relationships and challenges with greater clarity. If any part of our discussion resonated, if you felt a flicker of recognition or a deep curiosity, I genuinely encourage you to pick up a copy. The link is in the description below. Consider it an investment in your own awareness and safety. And if you found this exploration valuable, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. We journey through impactful books like this regularly, aiming to uncover wisdom that can shape our lives for the better. We'd love to have you join our community as we continue learning and growing together. Until next time, stay curious and stay wise.